Julia and Kirsten Saunders, welcome to Modern Life to talk all about family.
Thank you for having us. We are so excited. This is one of our favorite topics.
Yes. And listen, I know that you two have been together for a while, but we got to take it back for people who are just getting to know you. How did you first meet and get together? And how did money play a role in those early days?
Oh, my goodness. So we met the old-fashioned way. We met at the office. My work husband became my real husband, and money was a very early part of our conversation. So we were actually starting the same job on the same team on the same day. And we started dating a couple months after we started and decided to take a vacation together. And at that time, we decided to split the vacation, the cost of the vacation, 50-50. We were in travel, so it was pretty affordable. And when we got back from the vacation, Julian found out that I had put my half on my credit card and I had no plans of paying it off. I just wanted to continue the vacation. When you get back and you just want to keep the party going. And so he, on the other hand, was frantically working to pay off what he had just spent.
It wasn't my proudest moment, and I regret it. But to answer your question,
oh, yeah.
It was helpful because it forced us to have a conversation about money and relationships early. And we then later found out that a lot of people tend to avoid those conversations. Some people don't have those conversations until after marriage and maybe even after having a child, maybe when you're trying to get the house, right? And so we were really fortunate that I was such a jerk at that point to say what I said, and obviously I regret it, but it did force us to have that conversation, sort of reveal that bit of history about ourselves.
So after this argument and this realization that you guys thought differently about money, what happened next?
We broke up. We broke up. And then got back together. And to Julian's point, we both were incentivized to try and figure out what's at the root of this. I wanted to know what could be so terrible about debt that you would end a relationship with someone that you connected with. And he wanted to know what is so terrible about debt that he could end a relationship.
Why did I feel
why did you feel
seriously
so strongly
about it that I wasn't even willing to get to know someone that I was clearly attracted to and interested in building a life with.
Yeah.
And that's really when I started to look back at my childhood and some of the messages that I had, been taught as a kid, good and bad, but how all of those things in my environment sort of led me to this point where I felt so passionate about it, to the point where I was willing to end a relationship.
But you got back together.
Yes.
We did.
Got back together. Got back together. He was a very positive influence on me. I immediately started to get my financial life together. I moved out of my very expensive Midtown apartment into a little tiny closet of an apartment by Atlanta standards. Stopped spending, stopped eating out, stopped buying clothes, cut the cable, did all the, checklist of tactical things to get that debt down.
Yep.
And then 3 years later, we got engaged. And I moved in with him, and then we started saving up for the wedding, the honeymoon, paying down the mortgage. And so altogether, over about a 5-year period, we paid off $200,000 in debt.
And what about, particularly people of color? If you're expected to take care of your parents, that's just the cultural thing you do, and if you're from communities where that's expected, what's the implications there?
It's a huge question because I feel like people of color are at greater risk for burnout in terms of their finances, and they don't factor that into the plan. They plan to work until they're 60 or 65, not recognizing that something could happen. You could get sick, someone else could get sick, and it cuts that timeline, maybe in half, or at least cuts off the last little quarter of it. And if you look at even profession-wise, people of color tend to be in helper industries. And so they're working as nurses, as caretakers at work from 9 to 5. And then they come home and do it again from 5 to 9 with their families. And so they just got it on both ends. If you're hitting those peak earning periods at the same time as being burnt out, you really lose out on the ability to even ever catch up. So you're always coming from behind. You're always kind of balancing all of these plates. And eventually, some of them drop, if not all of them drop. It's a very tender and risky subject to talk about, but it's something that we can plan for if we're upfront and have the conversation early.
This is also where the sandwich generation intersects with the racial wealth gap. But let's just say for every $1 the typical black family has, white families have 10. I've seen up to 13, 17, depending on the study or how they're slanting it. And I'm not saying this, form of judgment, but
right.
These are the facts. And what happens is you're in your 30s, you're in your 40s, you're working. because your parents now, on average, have significantly less than most of those families, well, the timeline for you to sort of step in and provide some support is going to come a lot quicker than you might have hoped, right? So here you are at the peak earning years of your career, right? You've got some big decisions to make. Maybe you were looking forward to actually being able to buy up and sort of give yourself a little bit of rest. And now all of a sudden it's like, wait a second. Then you find out that your parents don't have enough, and maybe, they need you to start giving them a little bit of cash on the side, right? And that's sort of part of the problem. And I think that's like a huge blind spot for a lot of us, because we've been kicking the can down the road and ignoring it, hoping, and also just respecting, let's say, generational lines here. I don't want to, get too involved in my mom or my dad's finances. They're the elder here. And you didn't realize that, they've been pulling from their retirement just to get by. And now they don't have enough to do any of the things. And on top of that, you've got medical issues and so on. So I think that's the big thing that makes it, I think, unique, if you will, for people of color, is because they don't have as much. Their parents certainly don't have as much. And it forces you to jump in and rescue much sooner than it would other families.
Luckily, I don't have to support like my mom, but I know that the last thing I want my kids to have to do is depend or need like to pay for anything for me.
Yeah.
And so I'm so focused on leaving more, or at least like at the bare minimum, not leaving anything that they have to take care of.
Yeah.
How has it impacted how you look at your financial independence journey?
Yeah, I think seeing my parents role model it for me has changed a lot. It's helped me decide, like, how do we plan for life after work? Are we building a home somewhere, and how do we make that home accessible should one of us need a wheelchair or need to recover from surgery? My dad battled cancer last year, and it was great that he was in this new home because it didn't have any steps. It had a beautiful backyard. It's on the water, and I really think it helped facilitate his healing. Everything worked out, but I think about that now all the time, where it's like, right now we live in a 3-story townhouse, and it's like, that's probably not going to be sustainable forever. It's something that I think about all the time, especially now with, the public health crisis. You just never know, so.
Yeah.
Well, Julian and Kirsten, this has been delightful. Thank you so much for joining us on Modern Life to talk about family and finances.
Thank you for
so
having
much.
us.